So, these electric vehicles, they're far too expensive, right? They cost 10 times as much as a so-called normal car, and they only go 20 miles on a charge, and the batteries go to landfill after 6 months. These are all the myths that go around with electric vehicles. You won't be surprised to hear on a channel called Best EV. We kind of disagree with all of those things, but there is one point I will give as a concession. Until now, electric vehicles have been in the pricey segments. Those early adopters have been spending more than their competitive vehicles, but there is one brand in particular that's doing a lot about that. As they leave Chinese shores to go to Europe, here in the UK, we have an old British brand called MG. They're owned by a Chinese manufacturing giant these days called SAIC, and they think they have an answer to the whole price problem. Let's find out about their cars. Welcome to the channel. My name is Martin Lee, and if you like what we do here, hit that subscribe and bell icon so you never miss a show. It's been a turbulent few decades for the MG brand, known and loved by so many here in Britain. Cars like the Midget captured our attention and our hearts, but fast forward a few years, MG were no longer known for turning out fiery little cars like that, but they're now owned by the Chinese and supplying some markets with very, very sensible, good value EVs with good space, excellent range, and who would have predicted that? So today we're looking at each of their models in turn, and we'll try and figure out which is the best one to buy. What we're going to do is look at each car through a series of categories. We're going to focus on the long-range versions of each model as well, otherwise, look, I'll be here all day. First category is performance. And this part is good, because, well, you may be surprised. The MG5 is going through a refresh at the moment. A 115 kilowatt motor, that's 156 PS, 280 newton meters of torque. What you're looking at is a 0.62 miles an hour or 0 to 100 kilometers an hour sprint of 8.3 seconds. A little bit slower than the previous generation, that's still really good. What about the ZS EV? 115 kilowatt motor, and in that, the same horsepower and torque as the MG5. And again, the sprint 8.4 seconds. The MG4 hatchback is the new kid on the block. It has a rear-wheel drive 150 kilowatt motor. Even though it's a smaller hatchback, it doesn't weigh any less than the ZS EV. It's got a big battery in though. 0 to 62 time, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour is 7.9 seconds. Although the 4, 5 and ZS will likely sell more in general, MG have an ace up their sleeve. Unfortunately, not available where I live, but it is in other European markets. It's called the Marvel R, and it is all-wheel drive, a very fast SUV, and it does the sprint in less than 5 seconds. A performance version of the MG4 has been confirmed as coming at some stage in 2023, but a little far out to include any exact specs in this video. Next up, let's take a look at design and styling. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but we can still touch on some points. I really like the refreshes that MG have been bringing out to the ZS EV and the MG5, the estate, the wagon. Both are not exactly, well, the most cutting edge of designs. You could argue they're still not, but I kind of like them. The MG5 cuts that traditional station wagon look, pretty much the only all-electric estate car in the world, if you don't include the Porsches. You can get some nice alloys on it, the roof rails give it some character, and the ZS EV and the Marvel R are much more to the current market's taste. Of course, I'm talking about the SUV segment. From the side, they look almost identical, but at the front and the rear, I think the Marvel R looks sharp and clean. The MG4 is really stepping up the game. The looks are more aggressive, with a pointy and angular nose. That split spoiler at the back and the two-tone bodywork really kind of more sporty image. And inside, I think it's far more refined than the others, and I should know, I own a ZS EV. Let's talk about size and dimensions now. It may not be the most exciting category we'll touch on today, but it's important when talking about which car you might want to put on your driveway. The ZS EV packs a good punch for its size, 4.3 meters long. In comparison to the MG5, that's 4.5 meters long. So, you get more space inside? Well, The MG5 fares well, 464 litres of space and 578 litres to the roof if you're not using the parcel shelf. Fold down the back seats and a whopping 1,456 litres of space. The ZS EV has 448 litres of space, but only 1,166 if you fold the back seats down. So, even though you're buying what looks like a taller, bigger, bulkier SUV, it's the shorter wheelbase that cuts down on space. The Marvel R is longer at 4.67 metres, but boot space is still only 357 litres, or about 1,400 if you fold the seats down. And don't forget that Marvel R also has some space up front with a 150 litre frunk. And the MG4 looks the smallest from the outside. But here's the kicker, it's built on a dedicated EV architecture. It puts the batteries all down low and it creates loads of space, much more on the inside than you would expect. The boot space, a very respectable 360 litres, almost 1,200 litres with the seats folded down. If you need to hitch a trailer for some towing, all models approved for 500 kilograms, or in the case of the Marvel R, 750. The all-wheel drive coming in handy for extra grip. So if it's size you're looking for, then go for the estate version. The MG5 is the one for you, but the MG4, a very good runner-up. Now onto the good stuff, batteries, range and charging. So considering the relatively cheap price, this is where cars really start to impress from MG. Sure, the Model 3 and the Y from Tesla are going to charge faster, accelerate faster, have more range. But we need to put these things into price brackets, and some of those models I've mentioned can be twice the price. Battery capacity in the MG5 is 57 kilowatt hours usable. The estate has a WLTP range of 403 kilometers or 252 miles. That's impressive. But let's look at the ZS EV. The first thing to note is the increased battery pack. It's 68.3 kilowatt hours usable. On the WLTP cycle, that is 273 miles. If you drive around the city and don't do high speed, you can do more than 350 miles in decent weather. The Marvel R has a 65 kilowatt hour pack, rated for 231 miles, and the MG4 fares well. Like I say, dedicated EV platform, and a relatively small battery pack at 61.7 kilowatt hours, but 281 miles of rated range. So all the MGs fare well when we're talking about range, and the difference between them isn't that big. If you're considering an MG and range is important, go for the long-range version of any of those cars. So with ranges like that, you won't be plugging in too much, but what if you do? Well, on AC charging, either at home or maybe destination charging, they'll go up to 11 kilowatts. Most domestic chargers are around 7-ish kilowatts. On DC, a big jump with the MG4 thanks to its dedicated platform, charging speeds of 135 kilowatts at their peak. And that's great, right in the ballpark of what is a very respectable, decent modern electric vehicle. And the others all fall between about 85 and 95 kilowatts. Again, it's not market leading, but it's comparable to a competitor like, say, the Hyundai Kona or the Kia e-Niro. Technology and software in the MG is surprisingly good, but don't be expecting best in class. The screens are a touch laggy and the colours aren't the best. MG have what they call MG Pilot software. That's their advanced driver assistance system. Adaptive cruise, collision warning, auto braking, lane keep assist. Snazzy new app on the latest cars as well, can precondition the car and check your battery percentage. And of course they have things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So having said all of that, let's put that in the context of the money you're going to spend. That's perhaps the biggest reason that people like these cars coming into Western markets from China, and that is value for money. And it's really hard to explain because prices are different all over the world, and particularly where you're watching this. But incentives vary, and if you can layer those in with some decent prices, these cars, either to buy outright or on a monthly finance plan, can work out very, very attractive. Okay, let's start with the newest and cheapest, the MG4. Long range, where I am at least, about £28,500. You can get into one from £26,000. ZS EV from £32,000. for the big battery. The estate format, if you want the MG5, about the same, about £31,000. Now, the Marvel R is a European vehicle, but not right-hand drive for the UK. So my best guess, trying to put them all in line, maybe about £40,000 equivalent. So, which one would you go for? Well, it depends, doesn't it? I've owned the original pre-refresh version of the MG ZS EV and loved it. If I was going to buy one today, well, I must admit it's hard to ignore the practicality of the MG5, but you could say I'm at a certain stage of life with a family and things like that where the extra space and, let's face it, the value come in really important. It doesn't have quite the same range as its bigger battery SUV sibling, but that makes no real difference to me. If you don't need the space of the MG5 or the high position of the ZS EV, what about the Marvel R performance? And what about that MG4? If you were cross-shopping with something like maybe an ID3 or the old e-Golf, it's really hard to ignore the value in the MG. Our resident car reviewer had it for a week recently on test and raved about the platform that it was on. The only problem is perhaps availability. It's still pretty much a new vehicle. So let us know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear from where you are watching around the world. Let me know what you think. Do you own an MG? Would you buy a particular model? What would work best for you? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.